Hey there, it's John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to the Battle for Zendikar Pre-Release Primer. So if you've been watching the channel over the last 6 days, we've been doing our Battle for Zendikar full set review. If you missed any of those installments, we do have a playlist on the channel. You can check them out. And I would recommend getting very familiar with the set prior to the pre-release. But this primer is really about what you can expect from a pre-release for both new players who've never gone before, but also for existing players. We're going to talk about some archetypes, look at the mechanics, and also talk about expeditions that we have not yet talked about in the set review, since they are technically not part of the Battle for Zendikar set. So having said that, first thing to know is different stores do run their pre-release events in different ways. Many of them will do a 4-round Swiss event, and then you'll get prizes based on your record. Others will run a 5-round event, but treat it more like a traditional tournament where your top players will take the bulk of the prizes. Other stores will do a really traditional tournament and go based off the number of players and even have a cut to the top 8. So definitely check with your store what kind of format they're using and let you get a good idea of how long the event's going to last as well. So having said that, let's jump into the information. One thing that a lot of people ask me is, what should I bring with me to the pre-release? I usually suggest a deck box first off to keep your cards contained. However, Wizards of the Coast, which you're going to see in a moment, is going to provide one for you. So that's actually really nice, and you don't need to bring a deck box in that case. A couple other things though, always bring sleeves. You're going to want to protect your cards. There are some valuable cards in the set as well as the expeditions that are very valuable. You want to be able to protect them, especially if you're playing with them. It's always good to bring some dice as counters. There's many cards that are going to ask for counters or going to let you put counters on them. It's good to have that to keep track of. And thirdly, I think it's always good to bring a pen and paper. I mean, pens are very useful. A lot of times stores run out of them or don't have them available for players, and you need pens. But it's also the best way to keep track of your life total, especially if you're interested in eventually getting involved in competitive Magic. It's the best way to solve any discrepancies between life totals with your opponent, as opposed to, say, a spin down dice. However, keep in mind this is a casual event, and there's nothing wrong with using a spin down dice counter for something like a pre-release. So having said all that, here is a photo of the deck box that you'll be getting, and also the spin down counter that they're going to be giving you from Wizards. So that's pretty awesome. I think this is a great idea. So you're going to get this. You don't have to pick any colors or factions or anything like that. You're going to simply get your deck box with your dice, and then inside you'll have 6 packs of Battle for Zendikar cards that you'll open and build your sealed pool with. And you'll also have 1 promo card, which is just going to be a rare or mythic rare from the set with a date stamp on it in foil. And that will also be playable. One thing to keep in mind, which is really hard for me to remember, I've been trying the last couple times I played, is the new Mulligan Rule. So this is the first time this will go into effect universally for basically all competitive Magic and all Magic in general. So if you haven't heard of the new rule yet, basically what it states is players are mulligan just like they do now. A player with priority will decide if they want to mulligan or not. Then each player will decide after that by order of priority, and everyone will mulligan at the same time, and then it will repeat until everybody keeps their hand. So that part's all the same. What's different is once everyone's decided to keep their hands, at that point, again by priority order, each player who took a mulligan, whether they went down to 6 cards or 5 cards or 4 or what have you, if they took a mulligan, they're going to be able to scry one. So they'll look at the top card of their library, decide if they want to keep it on top or put it on the bottom of the deck, and once everyone has done that, who mulliganed, then the game will begin. So the trickiest part of this, I mean, relatively it's simple. The trickiest part is just remembering it, especially if you haven't been doing it, you're not in the habit. Hopefully judges will help remind people at the beginning of each round, at least for this event. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm very excited about this rule. It makes mulligans a little less punishing. It's going to hopefully bring out some more competitive games and not those kind of random, I mulligan down to 4 or 5 blowouts and I just still couldn't get land. So this is pretty exciting. This helps combo decks definitely once you start looking at competitive play. Just kind of helps them get to their combo a little faster and maybe makes mulliganing to get to the combo a little more desirable. But yeah, it's definitely a good rule. I think it's going to do some good things for the game. Just remember that it's in effect. So now, having said that, let's look at mechanics. First off, we have the rally mechanic, and whenever a creature with rally comes into play, they're going to get a triggered ability. But also, whenever another ally comes into play, that rally trigger will occur again, and it's going to trigger for all of your creatures, not just allies. Remember that. It's going to be all of your creatures. There's some pretty powerful rally triggers. There's things like this example that has vigilance, but then there's also cards that are going to give you things like double strike, +2/+2 till end of turn, lifelink. So keep an eye out on these. There's a lot of great synergy, and whenever an ally comes into play, it triggers these rallies. And the fact of the matter is, just because a card doesn't have a rally ability doesn't mean it's not an ally. So keep an eye on the line of text that tells you your creature type on all your cards. Next we have Devoid. Devoid's pretty interesting. Basically it says that a card is colorless. So in this example, Horribly Awry costs a blue and a colorless to cast, but it counts as a colorless card. So any card that is looking for colorless triggers, for example, if it says do X, Y, or Z when a colorless spell is cast, then Horribly Awry would count as a colorless spell even though it took blue to cast. Next we have Awaken, and in this example I can pay 2 blue and a colorless to counter target spell, much like a cancel that you're probably used to playing with. However, if I instead pay 2 blue and 4 colorless, I still cancel the spell, but I also get to take 3 Awaken counters, put them on a target land I control. It becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste. So my next combat phase, I can attack in with one of my lands as a 3/3 creature. So this will still count as a land. I can still tap it for mana. It can still be destroyed by land destruction, but it now can also be removed by creature removal as well, so keep that in mind. Another thing you can do with Awaken counters, you don't necessarily have to put them on a new land. If you have a land that's already been awoken, and let's say it has 3 counters on it, you could put 3 more counters and make it a 6/6 awoken land. So that's also another way you can use this ability. So very cool ability. Keep an eye out on this. Some of these are a little bit expensive, but especially in the late game when you have extra mana lying around, don't forget to look at the bottom of your card for this Awaken clause. Eldrazi Scions. There's going to be a lot of cards that tell you when this card comes into play, you also get 1, 2, 3, or however many Eldrazi Scion tokens. These are 1/1 colorless Eldrazi tokens, and hopefully you'll get some copies in your packs to play with when you play the game. But they can also be sacrificed at any time for 1 colorless mana. So their whole idea is to either help you ramp into some of your big spells in Eldrazi's, or you can just go wide with them and pump them up and just get into the red zone with a bunch of 1/1 creatures. Next we have Ingest, and this strategy is all about getting across and not only damaging your opponent's life total, but also making them take cards from the top of their library and move them into their exile zone. Now this is going to become more important as the game goes on, because as you're going to see in just a moment, there's something called Eldrazi processors that actually can use these cards that are in the exile zone. And here's an Eldrazi processor. So when he comes into play, if you can take a card from your opponent's exile zone and move it into their graveyard, you gain 5 life, so you get an extra ability. And again, some of these abilities are pretty powerful. Also, there's some processors that take the cards that are in exile and will let you do other things with them, like you can take your opponent's lands and put them into play under your control, things like that, which can get pretty crazy pretty quick. So one thing to remember too with these processors is these are exile cards. They don't necessarily have to be exiled by an ingest creature. They could be a card that was exiled through an enchantment. They could be a card that was exiled through your opponent having to exile something as a cost to a spell. So anything that's in your opponent's exile zone, no matter how it got there, is free game for the processors. Next we have Landfall. This was very popular in the original Zendikar. This is a way to basically trigger an extra ability every time you play a land. In this case, this creature gets a +1/+1 till end of turn if you played a land. Keep in mind that there's ways to get multiple lands into play a turn. There's cards that may let you play a land and then put 2 more lands into play when you cast a spell. In that case, you would get 3 different landfall triggers in that turn. An Evolving Wilds could come into play, which is a landfall trigger, and then you could sacrifice it to search for another land, and there's a second landfall trigger. So keep that in mind. The Evolving Wilds could even be played on your opponent's turn to search for a land and use this as a combat trick in defense. Finally, we have Converge, and Converge rewards you for playing multiple colors. Green is kind of the core color for Converge because it's going to have cards that are going to let you search up other basic lands to get multiple colors easier, and there's even some creatures that can tap for multiple colors. In this example, if you paid 4 forests, he would be a 3/3 Vigilance Trample because you paid one color to play him. But if you cast him with a forest and 3 mountains, he would be a 4/4 Vigilance Trample. Since you spent 2 different color mana, you got 2+1/+1 counters on him, and then so on and so forth. Obviously, you can't play one of each color mana because he only costs 4 to cast, but still, he would be a 6/6 if you paid 4 different color mana, which would be pretty good. You're also going to see a lot of spells that have Converge, where you get maybe bonus damage if you put more colors into it, or you get to draw an extra card if you put more colors into it, and that type of thing. So keep an eye out. There's some pretty powerful Converge mechanics, but sometimes they are difficult to activate. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the acronym BREAD. A lot of people ask me, okay, I've opened my cards. What do I want to put into my sealed deck? And this is a good way to kind of remember what you want to hit without forgetting any pieces of your strategy. The B in BREAD stands for bombs, and that's kind of slang to say these are your win conditions. These are your cards that are going to help you win the game. Here's a few examples of bombs. So bombs can be just about anything that's powerful. It doesn't even have to be a creature. It could be a spell with a big sweeping effect. You don't necessarily want to have 11 bombs in your deck. Usually just a couple will do. These are cards that you'll get to when the time's right, and they're going to help you win the game. But you don't want to necessarily draw a handful of huge Eldrazi's that you can't cast. Next we have removal, and removal is going to be a way for you to get your big creatures, your bombs, across or through some of your opponent's tough permanents. Here's a few examples of some removal, and as you can see here, there's cards that will exile any permanent. There's cards that will just take care of creatures. There's cards that will do direct damage that can either go to creatures or, if you don't need to, players. So these are all different examples of removal. Next, there's invasion. So if there's a board stall, you both have a lot of creatures out, it's important that your creatures can get across for damage. Different examples of evasion could be an unblockable creature, a creature with menace, a creature with flying, any way that you have an advantage to get around at least the majority of the creatures that are on the board. Aggro, and when you think of aggro in this acronym, you're not thinking of necessarily aggro in the classic sense, but think of it that you want to be able to get value out of every point in your curve, and this can be the 1-drop spot, the 2-drop spot, the 3-drop spot. So make sure you're using some aggressive creatures and spells that are going to be able to be productive at each point in the curve. Here's a few examples of some, in this case, aggressive creatures. Creatures that have haste, they're just going to have a lot of value. Even though you're casting a couple of these for 4, they can actually attack in on turn 4, which just gives them a little more incremental advantage. And finally, you have duds. And duds aren't bad, even though it has a negative connotation. Duds is basically cards you're not using right now, but they're in your sideboard, so don't forget that they're there. These are cards that can be very powerful in the right matchups, but you might not necessarily start the game with them. Boiling Earth is a great example that I'm probably not going to put that in my main deck, but if I lose game 1 to a bunch of Eldrazi tokens, don't forget that it's there. You can side this in and perhaps take games 2 and 3. The other thing to look for is synergies. There's a lot of really interesting archetypes that you want to keep an eye out for when you're building your deck. For example, we have a lot of rally creatures and allies in white and in black. And on top of that, there's a vampire ally group that cares about life gain. A lot of white creatures give you life gain, and a lot of the vampires take advantage of that life gain and get stronger. White and red also have a very strong rally and ally core mechanic to them. Blue and black are running a lot of the small Eldrazi ingest creatures that eventually lead you to your processors that can be very powerful, and these are the colors of the ingest creatures. Blue and red is all about finding value, finding ways to make your spells cost less, returning creatures to your player's hand or to the top of their library to get a tempo play, and doing direct damage to take out and remove some of the creatures that are already on the board. Black and red are your aggro colors. They're going to give you a lot of small creatures in many cases. They're going to be able to attack in quickly and find different ways to boost themselves. Blue and green, they focus on the Eldrazi tokens. So whether you want to just ramp into some big Eldrazi's or you just want to go wide with your tokens and pump them up and attack your opponents with an army of tokens, these are the colors that will be the best at that. Green and red have a strong focus on landfall. Those landfall abilities are sprinkled throughout those colors and have some good synergies with each other. So, having said that, those are just a handful of things to look for. There's other synergies and archetypes out there, but those are 7 of the ones that just stood out the strongest to me. But now let's move on to the expeditions. So, if you're not aware of what the expeditions are, they are incredibly rare cards that have been inserted into the packs of Battle for Zendikar. They are full art foil non-basic lands through different points in Magic's history. There's a total of 25 of them, and the rarity level is about the same as opening a foil mythic rare. So these are going to be extremely rare. They're going to be extremely sought after, and they're already fetching a very high price in the secondary market. So if you open one of these, make sure no one takes advantage of you. Make sure you know what they are, what they're worth, and that includes store owners, unfortunately, that may try to take advantage of some players. But if you get one of these, sleeve it up, protect it, keep a close eye on your stuff, as you always should when you're out in public in a tournament area. But these are really amazing. So let's take a closer look at what they are exactly. There is a total of 25. The first 5 we're going to look at are going to be different versions of the Zendikar dual lands. So these are allied color lands. They come into play tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands. These are very powerful. Now, what's interesting about these expeditions is they are only legal in the tournaments in Constructed that the cards are already legal in. So, for example, Canopy Vista is going to be legal in anything Battle for Zendikar is legal in. Once we get to some of the others, they're going to be more restricted. However, in Limited, they are all legal. So no matter which one of these you open, you can play it in Limited. I'd recommend playing this card, for example, if you were in white and green. It's going to do a lot of good stuff for you. It's going to give you some value. The only reason I might not play one of these new Zendikar lands is if I was maybe in a very aggressive black and red deck and I didn't want a chance bringing a land into play tapped early in the game when I'm trying to do some work. So as long as that's not the case, feel free to play these if you open them. They're going to be awesome. And of course, these type of lands are going to be more frequent because you could open the regular version of them as well. So we have Canopy Vista, Cinderglade, Prairie Stream, Smoldering Marsh, and Sunken Hollow. So as you can see, the art on these are really beautiful. They're all going to be in foil. These are just going to be extremely sought after. Next, we're going to look at the shock lands. There's 10 of these, so you get them in all color combinations. But they were originally printed in Ravnica City of Guilds block, and then they were reprinted in the Return to Ravnica block. So these are cards that are very sought after and very playable in Modern. And these, again, are just really amazing versions of those cards. And we have Blood Crypt, Breeding Pool, Godless Shrine, Hallowed Fountain, Overgrown Tomb, Sacred Foundry, Steam Vents, Stomping Ground, Temple Garden, and finally Watery Grave. If you open one of these and you're in those colors, you're splashing one of these colors as a third, by all means, it's going to be great. Play it. Be smart about it. There's times where it's not good to shock yourself. For example, you're up against a really aggressive red-black deck. But in most cases, yeah, you're going to want to play these, and these are going to be just added value if you happen to get one. Much like the last set of lands, the Zendikar lands, they also count as their basic land types. As you can see here in Watery Grave, it also counts as an island swamp, even though it is not a basic land in itself. So that's important to keep in mind if you play a card like this. So let's move on to the last cycle that you'll see, and these are the fetch lands. This might be the most controversial cycle. The Allied color fetch lands were originally printed in the Onslaught set, and they were reprinted recently in Khans of Tarkir. Now, the enemy colors were originally printed in the first Zendikar, but have never been reprinted. A lot of people were expecting them to be reprinted here. I guess they kind of are, but just in an extremely rare version. And of course, they won't be standard legal, like I mentioned before. So these cards can fetch a hefty price. All of them can fetch a hefty price, but the most valuable at this point you're going to see are going to be the enemy colored fetch lands, just because they just still have yet to see a reprint. So as far as playability goes, again, these are great to play to help fix your mana in limited. But also, these are awesome with landfall triggers, so keep that in mind. You may even want to play one that's off your color just to help with your landfall triggers in certain situations. So having said that, let's look at them. We have Arid Mesa, Bloodstained Mire, Flooded Strand, Marsh Flats, Misty Rainforest, Polluted Delta, Scalding Tarn, Verdant Catacombs, Windswept Heath, and finally Wooded Foothills. So those are your expeditions. Keep an eye out for them. People are going to be very excited to be opening them. These are very collectible. Great cube cards for anyone that's trying to build a cube that's kind of tricked out a little bit. And Legacy and Modern players also sometimes will keep decks for long periods of time. They like to invest a lot into them. So you'll see those type of decks that have a lot of foil cards and just different promo versions and autograph cards. So a lot of players enjoy collecting those and putting those into a deck. These are going to be very, very, very highly sought after. I can't emphasize that more than we already have. So that is our pre-release primer. Hey, the key to the pre-release is just go out there and have fun. It's a casual format. It's just a fun way to just play Magic with people in paper form with a new set, with new mechanics you've just never played with before. Don't worry about making a mistake. It's not about competition. You're not trying to win thousands of dollars of prizes. You're just winning a few packs of the new set. It's just a fun, casual, relaxed environment. That's what it should be. So hopefully you'll find a good LGS that you can go to with a core group of players that are fun and easy to get along with and fun to play with. That's what this is all about. So, hey, as always, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. Have a great day. Hey, thanks as always for watching. These videos are made possible by viewers just like you through Patreon. Please check out our Patreon page by clicking on the top right. Down below, we have more links to quality Magic the Gathering content. And if you're interested in seeing trading cards open that aren't Magic the Gathering, check out the link to our trading card channel, Heroes and Legends Trading Cards. Thanks and have a great day.